Your reality of the senses that you realize through your world out there has sensory receptors: eyes, ears, nose, taste, tactile, and about 110 senses actually: pressure and temperature and pain and all kind of even navigational sense. All of these senses come in through sensory neurons and go through impulse conduction and go into the spinal cord if it's down below, or maybe into the brain stem or into higher levels of the brain, and then process with various interneurons, because we have sensory neurons bringing information in, we have interneurons processing it, and then we have a response in our motor actions called motor neurons that fire away at various summations and give us a response. So we have a stimulus response. At the lowest, most primitive part of the brain, at the spinal cord level, or even an individual neuron has what they call a dendrite and an axon in a cell body. The three components of the neuron itself is for input, processing, output. At the spinal cord, which is one of the most primitive ones also, we have reflexes. We have what they call monosynaptic reflex, where you put your leg over another leg and you hit it with a deep tendon reflex hammer, and you jump, the knee jumps. That's a stimulus response. It has very little options. It either fires or doesn't fire. It's all or none. It's black or white. There's no gray. There's no refined motor response. It's just black or white. So the more primitive we are in our neurological structure, the more simple we are, the more things just fire or don't fire, black and white, all or none. But as we go up the spinal cord and go up into the brain stem, and then finally into the brain proper, the number of processing neurons, the interneurons, go up in number geometrically. So what they do is they process and give you a series of options on how to respond between the stimulus. So instead of just a stimulus response, a monosynaptic, one synapse. A synapse is a junction between input and output, or between a nerve and a nerve. Monosynaptic reflexes, if you stimulate it, it's going to fire and that's it, or it's not going to fire. It's all or none. But as you go up in the higher levels of the brain, you've got more and more associative fibers. They literally geometrically grow in numbers as you go up to the very highest part of the brain, the most advanced part of the brain. And that allows for a series of options on how to decide. So you have a kind of an unconditioned reflex, but you can conditionalize it up there with the different associations you make in your life. So for instance, if you have an event in your life that you think is terrible and you've never seen any benefits to it, if that happens again, you're probably going to react and run or avoid it. And if you see something really pleasurable and terrific, you're probably going to seek it. And so the most primitive part of the brain is sort of an avoidance and seeking, all or none survival mechanism. It's very subjectively biased with black and white thinking, and it's very what they call false positive. It's accentuated. It's seeing things that aren't necessarily there to be prepared for the gain of food or the loss or the being eaten by a predator. So these primitive responses mean that we have a very limited potential. It's just black or white. There's not a lot of options, and we don't have a lot of freedom as a result of it. But as we go into the forebrain and go all the way up to the very front of the brain, where there's massive amount of associations and interneurons, we could have a stimulus be associated with 1,000 different things, 10 million things. And so instead of, by the time it goes back down and causes a response in the motor reflex, we now have reflected on it. At the bottom, most primitive level, we have a reflex. At the most advanced part, we have reflection. So reflex and reflect. And reflection means that we stop, we process, we think about it, we decide what we're going to do with it, and then we control the responses down below, and we have governance. The more advanced part of the brain is governing. The most primitive part of the brain is just firing. It's just a stimulus. Now, you probably had a situation where you had a bug come into your a cockroach or something came there, and your normal response, blah, and you just responded, reacted, and ran or something, and dodged it. That's the primitive response. But you may have a little bug coming in there, and you may find out that it's a friendly bug, And you may learn about it. You may study bugs. You may find out, oh, it's a rare bug. I'd like to go and explore it. And instead of just running, you immediately do it. You might capture it, you might study it, you might not react to it. So the more primitive system is sort of an all or none reactive mode. Whereas you go up in the more advanced part of the brain, you act and you reflect. Now, this is sometimes called the lower mind and the higher mind by William James and Schopenhauer. It's called the immanent mind and the transcendent mind by Immanuel Kant. It is sometimes called the animal mind and the angelic mind by theologians, or sometimes it's called the one that is the human animal and the human angel, sometimes called. Or it could be called the human mind and the divine mind in theologians. There have been various writers, various psychologists that have given different terms to it. One is called sequential and one is called simultaneous awareness. There's different ways of looking at it. But the more we move into the forebrain, the more we move to the advanced part of the brain, the more options we have, and the more liberty we have, the more freedom we have to, you might say, how we're going to respond. Therefore, at the bottom, we're a byproduct of what is around us. So if our perception is prey or predator, we seek or avoid it, and we have not much choice. Our choices are very limited. We got to run automatically. It's a survival mentality. But if we go up into the areas of the higher areas of the brain and more advanced part of the brain, all the associations give us a series of options to act wisely and to reflect on it and be able to see our previous experiences from our subconscious mind and watch those responses and decide what to do. I've been teaching in the Breakthrough Experience program for many years now, the Demartini method. The Demartini method takes a stimulus and puts new associations with it cognitively, and takes something that we thought originally was terrible and find the terrific in it, find the upsides to it, or the things that we think are very, very positive and very terrific, and found the downsides to it. So the world outside us is not running us, we're running us. And every time we neutralize the polarization of our perceptions, we liberate ourselves from the bondage of those perceptions. In other words, if we're infatuated with somebody, whatever we infatuate with occupies space and time in our mind and causes reflexes. We've been highly infatuated with somebody and did things that we don't normally do, that we don't normally think about and planning doing. And if we're highly resentful, we can also do something and respond with rage and go, I can't believe I said that. Or I can't believe I said that when you're infatuated. So we're externally running. So it's an extrinsic, the world around us seems to run us when we're down in the primitive part of the brain. But we run us, our individual self, you might say, the real self runs us if we have reflective awareness. Reflective awareness is a sign of higher consciousness. And what's interesting, as we do it, it becomes more abstract. We have receptors, we have perception based on past experiences. Then we have conception, and what William James called apperception, the ability to take and integrate all the information and make an action. You don't make a Shakespearean play out of a reflex. You make a Shakespearean play out of an association of learning languages and looking and observing at thousands of different bits of data relating to human behavior. So we maximize our potential to the degree that we advance our brain function. We're in survival when we're dealing with the primitive part of the brain. We're in thrival when we're in the advanced part of the brain. Now, how does that relate to you? You know, I rarely talk about anything without talking about values, but let me just tie together some values with that for a moment. You have a set of priorities, a set of values in your life, things that are most to least important in your life. Whenever you're setting goals that are aligned with your highest value, the blood glucose and oxygen goes into the forebrain. And whenever you're setting goals that are maybe injected values from other people, trying to be somebody you're not, and you feel unfulfilled because you're pursuing something that's got a conflict inside yourself, I would love to do this, but this is what I should do. And then what happens is you end up in the more primitive part of the brain, the amygdala and hindbrain, where the reflexes occur, not the reflection occurs. When you do, you tend to go into your animal behavior instead of your angelic behavior, if you want to call it that. And as a result of it, you're externally run instead of internally run. I said many times in the past, maybe on the movie The Secret, if you've seen it, when the voice and the vision on the inside is louder than all opinions on the outside, you begin to master your life. So if you can't master your life being a reflex, being in the animal behavior, You're going to be responding to everything that goes on and all the vicissitudes around you and reactions around you. You'll be externally driven. And so you'll be living in a sense by reactions instead of actions. But if you live by the highest priorities and the highest values, you activate the forebrain, you get the most associations, the most options, the most liberty, the most freedom, the less reactions, the less bondage, the less distractions, the less impulses and instincts of seeking and avoiding that distract you. And the more you take actions with foresight, strategic planning, executing plans that are pre-thought out, seeing a vision of what's possible. These are the areas of the brain that do that. And you tend to mitigate all of the volatilities of the thing below, and you have governance. And you wake up your executive center. You have a desire center, which is the amygdala and the hindbrain, and you have the executive center, which is the forebrain. So whenever you're living by the highest values and you're living things by what inspires you spontaneously act. When you're living by the lower values, attempting to anyway, you are not spontaneously acting, you are emotionally reacting. So in systems 1 and 2 theory, the feeling and the thinking process, we have an emotional feeling for dealing with survival, but we have thoughts that we plan things out and associate with our stimulus. So it has nothing to do with the world on the outside. The stimulus, you can have a stimulus and be associated with it and cause a reaction and be in your primitive part, or you can take a stimulus and process it, put in associations and neutralize it. And when you neutralize it and balance it out, you go in the forebrain. That's one of the reasons why I teach the breakthrough experience and the Demartini method, because I can take any situation that you've ever perceived and take you from that primitive response and take you into the advanced response by asking very precise questions that allow you to balance out the mind, balance out the perceptions. So in other words, if you see all black or all white, all bad, all good, all negative, all positive, and it's black and white, the primitive part of the brain is going to run you, and you're not going to have very many options, and your potential is going to be weakened. And in the process of doing that, the second you actually go into balancing out the mind by asking questions that allow you to see the things that you're unconscious of. For instance, if you're infatuated, you're conscious of the upsides, but you're unconscious of the downsides. If you're resentful, you're conscious of the downsides, unconscious of the upsides. If I ask you questions when you're infatuated, what are the downsides? And I ask you questions when you're resentful, what are the upsides? And I bring them into balance. Once I bring them into balance and associate new perceptions to it, well, all of a sudden the forebrain now runs the game. And all of a sudden you now have the freedom again to decide how you're going to work. You're free to act any way you want. So your potential is now infinite. When I say infinite, in the forebrain, there are millions, billions, and possibly trillions of associations you can make with the stimulus. When you look at the brain, I remember dissecting out the brain many, many years ago when I was in my 20s and studying neurology to the fullest. And the forebrain has literally jillions of connections. The number of connections are vast. So that means instead of just a stimulus and a response, one synapse, and you got all or none, you now have a billion types of options of how to respond to a stimulus. So the more you use your forebrain, the more you use your executive center, the more you live by your highest value, the more you spontaneously act from within, not be perturbed from without. And the more you know how to govern, that same part of the brain takes those impulses and instincts that you have out there that are running you and allows you to see both sides of them. And when you see both sides, you're centered. When you're centered, you act wisely. When you're off center, you're polarized and you're emotionalized. And as Warren Buffett says, until you can manage your emotions, don't expect to manage money. And as Robert Greene says, until you manage your emotions, don't expect to lead as a social leader. I could say, if you want to be well and not ill, you have to balance out your physiology, as Pythagoras and many philosophers and thinkers since the ages. But if you have a highly polarized state, your physiology will do it. If you see more challenge and support, your sympathetic nervous system will come online and you'll lateralize into the sympathetics. If you see more support than challenge and more infatuation, more seeking, you'll end up with the parasympathetic. When any one of those dominate, your heart rate variability gets narrower and you basically have less resilience, less adaptability. You have more of an inflammatory response because when you're highly infatuated, you feel the loss of that. And if you get angry, if you lose it, And if you see this thing you're resenting, you fear the gain of it, and you get angry if it comes near you. So the anger causes an inflammatory response, literally, and it affects your immune system. And so your health suffers when you're just dealing with that. So all areas of your life are raised in potential the second you end up learning how to balance out your perceptions. So that's why I put the Demartini method together. If you've never been to the breakthrough experience, hopefully you can come to there and learn the Demartini method, because the method is a scientific, reproducible, duplicatable series of questions that allow you to not let the primitive part of your brain run your life, where you're emotionally reacting and letting the world on the outside run you, but you're allowing the vision and inspiration from the inside to guide your life and to act with wisdom as an executive function, as a leader, leading the way to do what you want to do in life. That's your fullest potential. So how to maximize our fullest potential is really the ability to stay on priority and live by what's really most important to us, and say no to things that distract us, and take situations that we have that normally stimulate us and cause us to seek or avoid really quickly, to go in there and take those emotional baggages that we have that are stored in the past, and go in there and with the Demartini method and neutralize it, and go in and take those situations. See, anything that we polarize in our perception that's highly polarized into black and white was stored in our subconscious mind, and it surfaces with large diamond neurons and make us fire for survival. And they run our lives in most cases. And most people are automatons reacting to misperceptions and subjective biases that surround them, instead of actually stopping, taking a perception, bringing in new associations with it, neutralizing it. John Milton basically said, the poet said, it can make a heaven out of a hell or a hell out of a heaven. We have the capacity with our forebrain and our higher mind and our angelic mind, or our transcendent mind, to transcend the emotional reactions of the stimulus that's around us. Many people, since the COVID experience, what I call St. COVID in the last year and a half, they've chosen to see this as a terrible event, and they never stopped to look at the blessings and the upsides that have happened in here. Or they see something that's terrific, and they fail to see the downsides. Anytime you have a highly polarized state, you're going to activate that reactive mind. And the reactive mind is not where you feel empowered. In fact, that's where you get polarized and you lose your identity. Let me explain that. When you infatuate with something and you minimize yourself in turn, or resent something and exaggerate yourself in turn, you're not your authentic self. You're a minimized, deflated, or a maximized, inflated persona. They're masks that you wear around you because of the reaction. And you end up feeling proud or shamed in your reactions. And that's not where your power is. You're never going to have certainty and power in that state. But the second you level the playing field and balance the equation and bring in the associations of the forebrain and neutralize them, so you're now acting, not reacting, and not externally run, but internally driven. Now you're acting wisely and you're authentic. And we all want to be loved for who we are, and who we are is that authentic self. So we maximize our potential to the degree that we're authentic. We maximize our capacities to have foresight and to be able to create what it is we want as co-creators of our world. And that's where the power is. So as long as we're in judgment, as long as we're in the reactive state and we're misperceiving things and polarizing our perceptions, we're not going to maximize our potential. But we are going to maximize potential if we ask the right questions. The quality of our life is based on the quality of the questions we ask. And the most powerful questions that I know, which our intuition is constantly attempting to do, is to ask the questions that neutralizes and balances out the mind, so we get back into our executive center, so we can maximize our fullest potential, fullest bouquet of our expression of our brain. When we do, creative genius is born, innovation is born. When we are living by our highest values and pursuing challenges that inspire us, we activate our most innovative mind. So if we stop every day and live by priority and ask ourselves, what is the highest priority action I can be doing today at this moment to allow me to maximize my potential and fulfill my highest value and purpose and do the greatest service to other people in the most efficient, effective way, in a way that inspires me, you're going to maximize your potential in life. But if you allow yourself not to, and you're doing lower priority things, and you're subordinating to everybody else, or trying to judge people and putting people on pedestals or pits and going into shames and prides in yourself and lose your identity, you're not going to maximize your potential. As emphatically said, there's love and there's strife. And when we're living in strife, we disempower ourselves. When we live with love, we empower ourselves. And love means that we're actually able to love ourselves and with reflective awareness and love other people. And that means we're not able to let the perception, the first initial perception run us. We neutralize the perception. Instead of seeing something terrible, we immediately find the upsides. Our intuition is always trying to bring the unconscious conscious to make us fully conscious and mindful about our experience. And the moment we actually do that, we're liberated. We're liberated from the bondage of the misperceptions that cause us to react as an animal, as a survival mechanism in our amygdala, in our desire center. And we allow ourselves not to be impulsively addictive and compulsive towards immediate gratifications, but we look for long-term visions, and long-term vision pays. Long-term vision is what opens up the doors of possibility. And long-term visions allows us to take whatever happens in our life and turn it on the way, not in the way. And that's why the quality of our life is based on the quality of the questions. We want to be able to ask questions, no matter what's happening on the outside, how to bring it back into balance on the inside. When we do, we're poised, we're present, we're purposeful, we're patient, we're in a sense prioritized, and we're powerful. And that's where we actually have the greatest potential. So our mind, maximizing our mental potential in a sense, is literally maximizing our brain function, which is actually living by what's most priority in our life and giving ourselves to decide what it is that we want. And then realizing that no matter what happens, it has nothing to do with what's out there. It has everything to do with how you perceived what's out there. As so many great philosophers have said, it's not what you're actually experiencing, it's how you interpret what you're experiencing. You can make a heaven and hell out of it. William James said that the greatest discovery of his generation is human beings can alter their lives by altering their perceptions and attitudes of mind. So we have the ability to do that by asking new questions. That's why I want everybody to learn the Demartini method, because it's a tool you can use in almost every application of your life, in all 7 areas of life: your business, your intellectual capacities, your economics, your family relationships, your social life, your physical health and well-being, and your inspirations. If you learn how to ask those questions and liberate yourself from the misperceptions of the external world, you don't have to be run from the world anymore. You can be run from within. And as I said, if you allow yourself that voice and vision on the inside to be louder than all opinions on the outside, you begin to master your life. You live as a victim of history when you let your reactions run you. You live as a master of destiny if you go by what's really, really important to you in life. Stick to priority. This is the most significant thing that could be done to maximize human potential. And realize that what you feed your mind is part of that perception. If you're sitting there reading sensational, impulsive, sensory distractions of the social mass media and sensate, they sell sensation, they sell black and white. If you're filling your day with that, you're probably going to be activating your amygdala, your desire center, not your executive center. You're probably going to react and then be all engaged in that and then distracted by that, instead of asking yourself, is this really the highest priority thing I can be spending my life on? You know, I'd much rather read an Emerson's selected writings of Ralph Waldo Emerson, go feed something, my mind, with something that's meaningful. If you don't fill your mind with something that's meaningful, which is what your intuition is trying to do, it's going to be meaningless stuff. Don't let the outer world distract you. Don't let the mass media, the mass herd instincts, and everything else distract you from being a master of your life. Give yourself permission to shine, not shrink. Give yourself permission to lead, not follow. Give yourself to be enormous, not conformist. And give yourself permission to go and follow what's really in your heart, what's truly priority to you. That's why I have on my website, drdemartini.com, a value determination process that I encourage people to go and determine what you really value in life and stick to what's priority. If you feed your life with the highest priority things, you're going to grow and you're going to end up being a leader of your own destiny. If you stop and look at what you feed your mind intellectually and what you do in your actions, you have control over perception, decisions, and actions. If you prioritize perception, decisions, and actions, and no matter what happens, how's it helping you get what's meaningful? If it's an up, what's the downside? What's the down? What's the upside? To center it back into meaning. And if you take and prioritize your actions, you're maximizing who you are. Your potential is going to be at extreme elevations, and you're going to be able to do things that you didn't even know you're capable of doing. I've seen people that are sitting there wallowing in frustrations and blaming the world on the outside. All of a sudden, stop the story, stop the drama, get focused on what's priority. When you're doing what's highest in priority in the day and you're on top of the world and you get those things done, you're adaptable, you're resilient. When you're doing lower priority things and putting fires out throughout the day and never get around to what's really important, you're a bear and your life is emotional reactive. It's not hard to see. It's really not rocket science. So prioritize your life, live by the executive center, not let the amygdala run your life. You're going to have stimulus that's going to do it, but then how fast, your real potential is how fast you're able to take and regovern yourself when you've been perturbed by misinterpretations of life. The moment you're able to do that, you're a master. The speed in which you see both sides of an event determines the level of conscious evolution you obtain. If you can see both sides simultaneously and you center yourself, you're constantly acting wisely. If not, you're going to let the world on the outside run you. I'd rather have the voice and the vision on the inside run me than the world around me. I'd rather have the whole world against me than my own soul, is an old proverb. Still stands today. Anyway, that's the message that I wanted to share for the morning, for today, or whatever time it is there in the afternoon where you are. And about basically maximizing your potential, your mental potential. And also just know that there's another little tool that I want to give you as a gift to help you on that, because the magnitude of your vision will determine where you go in life. And I have a special program called Awakening Your Astronomical Vision. You know, there's some philosophers, Teilhard de Chardin said that we have a spiritual state and we have a physical state, and the terrestrial state, a celestial state sometimes called. And where some people think of ourselves as terrestrial beings having a celestial experience, a spiritual experience. Others believe we're celestial beings having a terrestrial experience. I'd like to think of it this way, that the magnitude of space and time in your innermost dominant thought will determine the level of conscious evolution you've attained. And the broader the vision you have, you will see things neither positive nor negative. You'll see things in transcendent. In a narrower vision, you'll see things black and white, and you're going to live in your primitive brain. So this cassette that I'm giving you, this Awakening Your Astronomical Vision, get it. It's just simply demartini.fm/free gift. And it's a live presentation I did at a planetarium in Johannesburg to a group of CEOs and YPO members. And we talked about how to expand our influence on the world, how to create a legacy, how to have a bigger vision. You're only going to grow as big as your vision. And people who are living in their forebrain, not their hindbrain, their executive center, not their desire center, are the ones that are going to expand and go do something and make a bigger difference in the world. So if you want to make a bigger difference, have a bigger vision, be more inspired, more spontaneously active, get the CD. I promise you'll watch it more than once, and you'll be mind blown by the information that's in there, because it's conducive to help you start taking prioritized actions in your life. So it'll dovetail perfectly with what we just got through saying. And also just want to remind you also about what's coming up this next week. I have another program. It's called Accessing Your 7 Greatest Powers. This is about how to take the 7 areas of your life: mental genius, business success, financial independence, family love and intimacy, social leadership and power, physical health and well-being, and spiritual immortality and truth. How to activate and awaken empowerment in all areas, because any area of your life you don't empower, other people are going to overpower. So this is practical applications of action steps you can do to empower those areas relative to your values while you're prioritizing your life. So I know that this is a master class that you definitely want to grab this next week. So make sure you sign up for it, because you're going to say thank you for this class too. So anyway, just wanted to have this weekly webinar with you. Thank you for joining me. May you go out and prioritize your life, and may you give yourself permission to live from the voice and the vision on the inside, not all the external distractions and mass media and social events and all the things on the outside. Take command of your life. It's your life. At the end of your life, you're going to be asked a question. Did you do everything you could with everything you were given? You want to be able to say, I did. I absolutely went for it. Okay, till next week, Dr. Demartini, I'll say, love you. Go out and do something with priority and do something amazing. Shine, not shrink.